Good afternoon. I know it's lunchtime. You've had a lot of great conversation over the last 2 days, but I want you to get energized because we're going to have a great sort of closing plenary here. As I mentioned yesterday when I opened the conference, I have been gone for about 3 months. And to tell you the truth, during that 3-month time, I did not spend much time thinking about philanthropy. I know that will surprise a lot of people, but I didn't. I was shielded from my email. My staff wouldn't talk to me. And my board even left me alone. But the last 24 hours have, for me personally, has really been energizing. It's allowed me to get my mind back in this wonderful world of philanthropy, reconnect with a lot of good friends and colleagues, meet some people from across the country, and I hope you've had a similar experience in that you've been able to think about the whole issue of imagination, philanthropic imagination, and think about how innovation plays into that and how it all leads, hopefully, to greater impact. I have found the discussions over the last couple days really just fascinating. I mean, last night, hearing Tom Steyer and Kat Taylor, for some of you who missed this question, somebody asked Tom Steyer, who signed the Giving Pledge, somebody asked, well, why are you giving it all away? And he said, well, when your hair is on fire, why wouldn't you? And so that idea of this passion for the kinds of things that he was involved in, I found very, very inspiring. And we had a great session this morning with trustees. Oftentimes trustees are not heard at conferences like this, and they gave us some great insight on the kinds of things they think about when they think about making change and innovation and the whole issue of board interaction. I found that fascinating. And Lee Shore this morning challenged all of us. She was thinking about evaluation, and she said, you know, what are we as a field doing to make innovation safe for our grantees? And it's a very challenging question. And I've heard so many things like this. I guess I must really be relaxed and back from a sabbatical because I even allowed myself to go to a session just now on gaming. And I liked it. So who knows where that's going to lead. My staff is, my vice president over here is shaking her head like, oh no. So let me please continue eating. We're starved up here, but that's okay. But let me tell you a little bit about what this last session is all about. We have brought together 4 very dynamic individuals from Southern California. I'm going to introduce them one by one as they get ready to talk. And we wanted to leave the conference on the note of inspiration and challenge. We want to inspire you, and we also want to challenge you. And I can't think of a better group of people to actually take on that task. So I want to get started here. And I want to first introduce my foundation colleague and good friend, Kafi Blumenfield. And when I was thinking about introducing Kafi, I thought, well, Kafi's all about inspiration. Every time I'm around Kafi, I'm inspired. First of all, I'm inspired by the fact that she gets everything done. You know, runs a big foundation, mother of 2 beautiful children, and I don't know, she gets it done. And she does a lot of driving back and forth from Woodland Hills, too. But Kafi, as many of you know, is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Liberty Hill Foundation. She is a tireless champion for investing in community leaders who are on the front line of change. And she is a thought leader and strong advocate in the field of social justice philanthropy. And under Kafi's leadership, I will also add, Liberty Hill is doing some really cutting-edge work, innovative capacity building work with leaders of grassroots organizations. So, and as I said, Kafi always inspires me, so don't let me down today, Kafi. No pressure, but Kafi, what do you have for us?
Well, Fred, thank you. And Jim, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here with friends and colleagues. And for those of you who are flying back to other places today, thank you for joining us for these last several hours of conversation. I'd like to make 3 kind of points, and I want to start off with a reflection. Today's cold, rainy day reminded me of it. Several years ago, when I was much, much, much younger, I found myself on a rare California cold day, camped out in the backyard of a family located just a few miles south of here in a very, very low-income neighborhood. And I remember I was huddled in this backyard, and around the backyard there were children's toys, and there were beautiful fruit trees and plants, but they all had on them this layer of black soot. I was there with my colleagues studying toxic dust coming from an adjacent diesel truck stop, and the residents were being exposed to this particulate matter from the diesel trucks idling. And it turns out that there were just horrific levels of these toxins in the air, and people were suffering from asthma and a whole host of problems. With our research in hand, the organization was able to improve the practices of those trucks. It was a critical step to cleaning up air in this particular neighborhood, and it was an important victory for the organization. But would the area residents, did they ever know about the work, the victory? They benefited from it. I don't even think the family whose home I was camped out in, I don't actually think they even knew the full issues of what brought us there today. What about their voice in the matter? What did they learn from the experience that they could then apply to the whole host of issues and challenges and injustices that they have to face day in and day out just to get by? Years later, I made this experience my metaphor for Philanthropy 1.0. That is, with good intentions and resources, we can swoop in to save the day, no doubt. And that's good charity, but it's not enough. Today, I'm seeing some LA foundations like my own really wrestling with how we can branch out in creative ways to solve, to really listen to people, and to work with folks who are being impacted by the ills that we seek to address, and to figure out their role in being part of the problem to address systemic issues, social justice issues. So what excites me about philanthropy today are community-centered approaches to our work. The art hasn't been perfected, but the seeds are there. At Liberty Hill, I think the foundation was forward-thinking years and years ago when the founders decided that being young people of inherited wealth, they didn't know anything about poverty and discrimination. And so what they did is they brought folks who were on the front lines, experiencing these issues day in and day out, to help decide where their dollars should go. As a public social justice foundation, today we're trying to take this idea even further. We seek out community engagement, and quite frankly, we're trying harder and harder and harder to listen. It doesn't sound innovative sometimes, and with all of the exciting, wonderful things that are new things that are happening in the field, but we are trying harder and harder to listen. So where has this led us? quite frankly, to great impact in ways that are strengthening our grant making. One, so picture this. You're a first-time executive director. Some of you, this may be your story. This certainly was my story. You're working for a small organization. You have tons of passion. You're committed to the cause. You have maybe a couple of staff members, a couple of volunteers, but you can't pay your staff members enough because you don't have a big enough budget to do so. So your staff members don't stay very long. You have high turnover rates, and there are enormous pressures that you face every day on the programmatic end. But also, you have to master fiscal, strategic, and fundraising skills that you were never taught as a community organizer. So you're learning it as you go along. We listened to our grantees, and they said, you know what, these days require more than money. They wanted intensive training, not just for their staff members, but community members, the volunteers who are engaged in their work. They wanted training from seasoned leaders to understand firsthand the social justice work that they're doing and their unique obstacles. The result was our Wally Marks Leadership Institute, which may feature grantees on the learning end as students, but also as trainers. We will train them to be trainers in areas to help other grantees increase their odds of winning, quite frankly, David and Goliath battles. So what's the result? 90% of the grantees that have gone through this program have demonstrated changes in their practices that have resulted in increased wins and improved work. 2, philanthropy is not just about giving away the money. Philanthropy is also about raising it. We heard our grantees talk about the importance of not just being seen as people who have a hand out. We heard our grantees say, we want our communities to also be seen as the investors in the change that they seek. So we set out to expand and diversify our community of individual donors. Next month, 100 African Americans and allies interested in becoming strategic donors to address LA's African American communities are convening at our annual Uplifting Change Summit to talk about how they can more strategically together amplify their impact. And I'm excited about this because when you see these folks together in the room, some folks who have been part of philanthropy for a long time, some folks who are just owning their philanthropic role, it's a wonderful, wonderful passion. We've created new giving circles of donors, young donors, lesbian and gay donors, where they can increase their impact by giving together. In just the last couple of years, for example, LA has seen 5 new Asian Pacific Islander giving circles made up of 75 to 80 people dedicated to giving to the API community, which quite frankly is wonderful given that nationally the API community only gets about 0.5% of national philanthropic dollars. For my foundation, these efforts have not only been useful to change the frame around communities and diverse communities from like this to being part of the investors in our change, but they've also provided us with greater understanding about the issues we seek to address, the communities that we are working in, and they provided us with more community buy-in. 3, remember Rolodexes? You know, someone out here you know still has a Rolodex, okay? Someone has a Rolodex. So we have our 21st century Rolodex, and we are using our 21st century Rolodexes to put our contacts and connections at the disposal of our grantees. So some of Liberty Hill's smaller and newer grassroots grantees just don't have sufficient political relationships to build broad alliances. I'm excited by the efforts that I'm seeing at LA foundations to help our grantees build new alliances with government, with philanthropy, academia, and beyond to increase the potency of their campaigns beyond dollars. In creating these alliances, I'm hopeful that philanthropy will not only better be able to address the socioeconomic ailments of our city, of Los Angeles, but by these efforts, I think that we can actually strengthen the fabric of democracy itself by creating new spaces for healthy discussion, debate, moving beyond party politics, and by fostering conversations that really underscore we are all in this together. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause us, the philanthropists, to overlook the circumstances of injustice, of economic injustice. By becoming better listeners, responding to the stated needs of the communities we seek to impact, and not just our needs, and giving more and diverse people a seat at our philanthropic table, I think Philanthropy 2.0 will heed Dr. King's words of wisdom and result in a more just and vibrant and healthy city."
Thank you, Kafi. Thanks, Kafi. I'm still inspired. So now let me turn to Sammy Hoy. Samuel Hoy is the dynamic and thoughtful president of the Otis College of Art and Design. His work is rooted in a very profound conviction that art and design thinking, products, and services matter socially, culturally, and economically. Put another way, when a student comes to Otis, Sammy acknowledges with each student that, "I know you're here looking for maybe a prestigious career in art and design, but I'm hoping you leave this institution wanting to change the world." And that's something I think we can all admire about his approach to education. He is driven by the challenge of educating a new kind of creative professional who can meet the challenges and opportunities of our times. No stranger to philanthropy, Sammy has also a long history of developing innovative arts programs and lending his creativity and intellect to the shaping of the creative economy, not only here, but across the nation. So Sammy, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred, for the introduction, and thank you so much for including me on this distinguished panel to explore the topic of the power of philanthropy with this august group. As I gather my thoughts around the topic, I realize that my home field of higher education has a lot of common with philanthropy. And I see some expression of uh-oh around the room already. Both are national resources and global leaders in their fields. But because both have persistent mindsets and practices established in times radically different from today's reality, both have internal desire but also external call for action to change and to adapt to dynamics of our times. And yet, because both fields have derived our historical strengths from conservative impulses and behaviors, despite outstanding individual exceptions, I would say our collective field responses have been sputtering. I think that would be a nice way to characterize it. In the case of philanthropy, I was very taken by a very good summary from the Monitor Institute reports of what's next for philanthropy. So I'll just quote that even though you might be familiar with it. It says, "An intimidating range of forces, globalization, shifting sectoral roles, economic crisis, complex social and environmental challenges, and ubiquitous connective technologies are changing both what philanthropy is called upon to do and how donors and foundations will accomplish their work in the future." In this very anxious time, where different fields like philanthropy and higher education, we're staring at very big, messy issues, and now we're imagining very big, comprehensive solutions, I hope philanthropy would tap into an area that is critical in the 21st century context. And so a lack of better expression, I'll call this area creative convergence. The creative fields, such as art and design, and the creative professionals who engage in these fields can be potent resources to philanthropy. But too often, the consideration of creative types and their work are relegated to the very narrow confines of the arts and arts education. But 21st century solution requires an integrative strategy and new ways of bridging creative minds and resources to other sectors, I believe, can bring heightened power in advancing economy, education, social health, and of course, cultural vibrancy. So let me describe for you a concrete project that I observed at Otis. Two muralists met at Otis as students, and they launched together a multifaceted project called the Mobile Mural Lab. it took advantage of the LA sign ordinance that does not discriminate between commercial signs and fine arts mural. And so the drafted language of the ordinance positions as illegal only hand-painted murals on private property. So artists being subversive, but these two being proactive as well, they got a city search and rescue vehicle, and they retrofitted in such a way that the exteriors become mobile mural platforms or graffiti platforms. And the inside interiors of the truck have been outfitted to be a classroom to teach different communities the traditions and techniques of mural painting, the history of it, and also it become an educational space of social issues that promote civic education.
That's great.
So, and they drive this around, and then so different community and neighborhoods can be engaged, and most often in partnership with schools, artists, organizations, and communities, so that the community have a way of expressing themselves in a healthful situation, and the interior learning and dialogues very much inform the exterior's opinion as expressed through aesthetics and also imagery. The Mobile Mural Lab also has a second life as one of the most successful anti-vandalism intervention efforts that's contracted by LA County. So when you look at this project, it's a public art project, it's a community development effort, is it arts education, is it civic dialogue, is it neighborhood hangout, or is it crime prevention? And obviously, the answer is all of the above. Now, this is a very local example of creative convergence. But as our societies become more diverse and global, and fates of peoples and countries become more intertwined, we now face increasingly complex social and world issues. And they are very aptly described, if you're familiar with the term, called wicked problems. A wicked problem is defined as a problem that's very difficult or almost impossible to solve because of contradictory and changing conditions and requirements that are hard to recognize and not friendly to each other. These are problems with such complex interdependencies that the effort to solve one aspect of a problem creates new problems actually on site. So we can open our newspaper and drop a finger, and whether we're looking at climate control or our state and federal budgets, and we'll be looking at a wicked problem. And wicked problems are not solvable by a singular and linear solution, but need to be managed by inventive and calibrated set of solutions as complex as the problems themselves. So they need an all-of-the-above kind of approach in order to attack them. And so the creative minds and the creative fields are equipped to help fashion such transformative solutions. Why? Because art and design thinking naturally embrace these following characteristics: multiple perspectives and compassionate perspectives, critical and innovative thinking, risk-taking, collaboration, and communication. A lot of the same thing that actually Kafi talked about. At Otis, we're an art school that has built into our curriculum community engagement and social responsibility. So we would love to see more imagination, more risk capital, and more opportunities coming from the philanthropic field to engage the creative minds in new and very bold ways. I personally am also privileged to serve on the board of the James Irvine Foundation, and it's really gratifying to see its art programs to be holistically envisioned to serve the foundation's mission to advance opportunities for all Californians. And its newly revised art strategies are designed to engender new practices. Another California foundation that I would like to give a shout out to is the Getty Foundation. Recently, the Getty provided a groundbreaking example of creative convergence through its Pacific Standard Time initiative. And I think most of you know PST, so I'm not going to labor, except by saying that it is a spectacular coalition of cultural, public, and private organizations with true cross-sector participation across Southern California. Beyond reclaiming a very important part of Californian history, its economic impact was established to be $281 million to support 2,500 jobs and also close to $20 million in tax revenues for state and local governments. But examples like the Mobile Mural Lab and Pacific Standard Time are still all too rare. But the philanthropic field can help to generate many more such innovative projects. The creative multi-sector convergence itself is actually a wicked problem. It does not happen by itself, even though diverse sectors share common interests and common stakes. The reason is that silos are very difficult to break down, and also governments, for-profit entities, academia, and nonprofits, we are too burdened with internal priorities to stimulate, let alone lead, a convergence effort, plus perception of self-interest often muddies the water. But the philanthropic forces are uniquely positioned to lead the charge of creative convergence, as the Getty did with PST, because you are generally neutral, have the mission, the resources, the stature, and the leveraging platform to command cross-sector attention and also to ensure quality of engagement. So I finish by leaving you with 2 questions and a wish. The first question is for those in the audience whose focus is in empowering communities and building infrastructures. The concept of creative placemaking is now a national movement. What can philanthropic forces do more to support synergistic partnerships between the creative sector and development groups in other sectors? Second question is for those whose focus is in direct investment in people. We have entered an age of ideas that emphasizes originality, and we are in a new economy that demands a creative and skilled workforce. So what can philanthropic forces do to promote human welfare in partnership and through the creative portal? Finally, my parting wish is for philanthropic leaders to positively challenge their boards and their staffs to investigate, to support, and to champion new and innovative convergence practices, and with hope more that will engage the creative sector. In my own professional engagement with funders over the last few decades, I have seen funding positions shifting from being philanthropic benefactors with a judging and gatekeeping function to strategic investors that are now seeking partners to fulfill a common vision. Maybe on this evolutionary pathway, there's a very worthy role for philanthropy to occupy as partnership conveners. And as economic and social paradigms shift all around us, philanthropy is in a very unique position to converge and to mobilize multi-sector forces and to put into action the value that we need to jointly foster the whole in order to succeed individually. And very much like Kafi says, we are all in it together. And final question is, if philanthropy doesn't lead that effort, who can and who will? Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. Great questions and a great challenge for all of us. So let me go to our next speaker. Lisa Stevens, a California native, is a veteran of 23 years at Wells Fargo. She currently serves as president of West Coast Banking, in addition to holding a number of other national positions with the bank. And again, Lisa is one of these very inspirational people who seems to find time, even with a big and challenging job, to do more in our community. She provides inspiration for us all by serving on a number of nonprofit boards, including as a trustee with the board at Los Angeles Children's Hospital. And I'm also very happy to note that Lisa and I share something else in common. We're both undergraduate alums at a wonderful university called Santa Clara University up the road. So I wanted to make that shout out, Lisa. So Lisa, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for having me. And so, Sammy, I have to start with, do you think it's a wicked problem to have a banker talking to people about philanthropy?
It's not at all. It's all of the above. It's actually a great convergence.
Well, I'm definitely feeling like it's a wicked problem to have followed both of you. So it was a pleasure listening to both of you talk. So I do. It's great that you mentioned Martin Luther King, and the timing is good this week. But one of my favorite quotes is from Martin Luther King Jr. is, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" And I think about that a lot, all the time, actually. And I think I can make some correlations with what's it like to work for a big company, and how do you get that message, and how do you get that to be part of a culture and part of an organization that you're in. And so I'm going to start actually with a personal story. Last year, I have 3 children, 11, 7, and 13. Our family decided that we were not going to do Christmas presents. So we celebrate Christmas, that we weren't going to give any gifts and we weren't going to receive any gifts. So we made the phone calls to our parents and to our brothers and sisters and said, no gifts for us. If you guys want to do anything, go volunteer or go do something. Sat our 3 kids down and said, you know, we're afforded quite a bit, and we've decided that we're going to adopt another family. It's a family of 6, found this family, and we're going to do everything that we would have done for ourselves for them. And needless to say, this was not a happy time for our 3 children. So they're like, okay, what? No gifts? They're like, no gifts. And so it was not easy. It was hard. But they started to get into it, and we started to get into going shopping and buying all the things that they would have wanted, whether it was some iPod or it was the latest, newest hair clips that my 7-year-old loved or whatever it was. And they got to learn about the family and their names with the kids. And we never met the family, but we did all these things. And so it's a long process. It's like 3-4 weeks leading up to Christmas. Christmas is coming. It's a few days away. And the group of people that I work with gave me a gift of a trip to Disneyland for our family. And there's 5 of us in the family. And so we had 5 tickets. It came with gift certificates to like have drinks and snacks and everything else. And so I told the kids after the event, I said, I'm like, oh, we got this present. We get to go to Disneyland. The 5 of us, it's going to be really fun. And the kids were like, awesome. All right, yeah. And my 11-year-old, Michaela, said, okay. And she looked kind of funny. And she left. And then a couple minutes later, she's like, Mom, we want to talk to you. So she went and talked to her brother and her sister. And she said, we want to give the trip to our family. We want to give them the trip because they have 6 people, but their youngest, so she figured this all out. Their youngest is under 3, so she'll be free. So all we have to do is we have to figure out a way to get them there. We have to figure out a way to get them to Disneyland and get them back. So I share that story because you do have to teach people to give. And you have to teach them how great it is that once you start doing it, it's kind of addicting. Like you're all giving junkies in this room, right? You've dedicated your life to making this a better place for other people, which is amazing and humbling. But people have to teach people to have exposure to it. So when I think about that story, I think about our organization at Wells Fargo. So we employ 270,000 people. And of those 270,000 people, probably some of them have stories like my kids will have that they'll be able to tell of how or when they were first introduced to giving. But a lot of those people have never had the experience of knowing what it's like to be able to make a difference for someone else and just to do it just because it feels really good. And it's actually a pretty, when you get down to it, it can be one of the most fulfilling things you ever do. And so at Wells Fargo, we do spend a lot of time trying to introduce our team members to what's it like to give back and how do you get involved and how do you get a passion. And you can't just say do it, you've got to create things. And so one specific example is that when I came down here to Los Angeles and we moved from the Bay Area 4 years ago, we had a community giving campaign where the team members give money back to the community and they can give it to whoever you want. So you can give it to your local school, you can give it to a hospital, you can give it wherever you want. And we do this giving campaign every year. And we were doing about $2 million a year, which wasn't bad. The team members were giving back. We started to do things a little bit differently and make it more interactive. So we started bringing more nonprofits in and exposing people and giving them more opportunities for volunteering. There'd been like a lot of fundraisers where people were selling cakes and stuff in the office, and those things were fun. But it wasn't the interactive, like going out, touching, feeling, seeing, being in a place where you're actually exposed to it. So we started making things more interactive so that people started it started becoming this thing where like everybody was like, what are we going to do this year? This last year in Los Angeles, we did $8 million. That's 4 years later in a worse economy where our people aren't making, and these are people that are, fighting to keep their homes and paying high gas prices and everything else. The difference is that in a very short amount of time, we were able to put the connection for them together of the difference that they could make. We see that across the footprint, but we're here in LA, so I wanted to use that one specific example. So creative convergence. I would just say that when we talk about inspiration and we talk about challenging all of us, I think about creativity and collaboration and how do we take things and put them together to get a surge of things happening and taking place. So for all of you who work for and are part of any type of nonprofit, how do you hold me accountable? How do you hold my colleagues accountable? And how do you hold other for-profit businesses accountable to working with you creatively to figure out ways for solutions in our communities to help our communities to be more successful. It could be something as simple as, working with the LA Kings every time they score a goal, that a nonprofit benefits by for-profits giving, $100 to a school. Or it could be something where you're working with nonprofits to figure out how you get better lending for small businesses. Jobs are critical and so important, so what are we doing to help people to learn how to work through cyberspace to be able to get a job now or to build a resume? But the creativity piece is big, because I think sometimes everyone thinks it's just about asking for the money. So it's, you put together a nice little proposal and you say we'd like to get, $10,000 or $5,000, whatever the dollar amount is. I think the things that really make a difference for organizations and for people is when you can put a cause behind it, and you can put a bunch of different factors together, and then you start to get other people wanting to come along. So as a for-profit, when someone comes to me from a nonprofit and says, we have this great idea, and if you can take the charge and help us, then we can get other for-profits coming in and giving money, or getting people involved and volunteering and working on things. So there's lots of examples of that. I just share one quick one, which is that about 7 years ago, we did this with the schools in San Francisco, which were not doing well, much smaller than LA. Trust me, taking on the LA schools has been a big challenge for me, because it's 10 times bigger than San Francisco. But we had lots of challenges, and we knew we needed to get funding into the schools. And so we partnered with the San Francisco Giants, and we started doing something around every time the Giants scored a run. It meant money for the schools, but it also meant volunteer opportunities. So we started doing tweets, and we started doing things on the web of a radio station telling people you can volunteer. Home Depot ended up coming in and volunteering like new equipment to schools. And so it turned into this whole community of people saying, let's rally around the schools. It wasn't about Wells Fargo. It wasn't about the Giants. It was about the community helping the schools. But it was the collaboration and the effort of everybody working together to make it happen. We need to do that same thing here in LA. We need to do that in lots of places. But it gets people excited, and it's something to rally around. And then the last thing I would just say is, for me, and I would say this for my colleagues, and I have 2 colleagues, by the way, who are in LA, one who runs a foundation and one who runs social responsibility for us. So Byron Reed is right there, and Jonathan Weeman, which I know a lot of you probably know. But is that attaching a mission and purpose for people is so incredibly important. And just because they either work for you or you know them, it doesn't matter. It's how can you make the connection for them to give them something so that they can be excited about it. I still believe that most people wake up in the morning and want to make a difference. That most people wake up in the morning and they want to say at the end of the day, I did something that was good, I did something that mattered, but they don't know how. And so we're the how people. We have to show them how, and we have to connect those dots for them. And then the last thing I'll share is just another story, which I kind of keep with me and as a reminder all the time about when I get frustrated and I think, oh, you know what are we going to do? How are we going to keep moving things along? Is when we moved here about 4 years ago from San Francisco, at the time, my 9-year-old daughter wanted to play football, and so she was going to play flag football. And she practiced all summer to play flag football, and it was in San Marino, and she went out to try out. And when we got out to the field, it was like 110 degrees, which we were not used to coming from San Francisco. The hills were on fire at the time. It was crazy. And she was all excited. She got out there, and she was the only girl. And there were all these little boys running around. And so I went to sign her up. And there were a bunch of moms at the table, and they were signing kids up, and they said, oh, she's a girl. And I said, yeah, that's okay, isn't it? And not even thinking anything of it. And they're like, well, I don't think we've ever had a girl try out before. And I'm like, that's okay. She doesn't care. And she didn't care. She had full-on blinders on. It didn't matter to her. She gets out on the field. She's out on the field, and she's a great athlete. So she's throwing the ball. She's doing all these things. And she comes off the field, comes running towards me, and my husband was on the other end, and she came to me, not to him, which I'll tell you why I regret that now, but she came to me and she said, I want to go home. And she got tears in her eyes, and she said, they're telling me that am I a boy with long hair, and the coaches are asking me why I'm out here. I don't think I should be here. And she was so sad, and I walked with her over to one of the coaches, and I said, she thinks she shouldn't be here, that we should leave. And he said, yeah, you probably should go. And I left. and I took her. And I have so much regret over that decision that I share that story with you because the thing I should have done was I should have said, get back out on the field and keep going. So that the next time another little girl comes and wants to try out for flag football, she won't have to face what you have to face right now. And I didn't do that. So it was a big gift for me, and I do believe that in our failures we learn a lot more than we do from our successes. And that failure for me was a reminder to me that we have to all actively, constantly be challenging the norm. And whether we're challenging it with being creative, or we're challenging it with courage, or we're challenging it with figuring out a way to get people to work together, or saying we don't agree, or how we're going to do it, we've got to do it. And I will just say, Sammy, you're right, if not us, then who? And if not the philanthropic world, then who? And I do have you all on a pedestal, by the way. You all decided and picked at some point in your life to dedicate your life to helping other people. And that's just such an amazing thing to me. And so when I think about who's going to make the world a better place for all of us all the time, it's the people in this room. And never, ever, ever compromising what we know is the right thing to do, even though it could be super hard and mean sending a little girl crying back out to the field to say, you got to do this because you've got to be the person that starts it for someone else. So thank you.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. So our last speaker is another good friend, Ken Brecker, who is the dynamic president of the Library Foundation of Los Angeles. And Ken was formerly the executive director of the Sundance Film Institute. Ken is also very familiar with our field, having served for a while as president of the William Penn Foundation. But what you might not know about Ken is that as a young cultural anthropologist, he was the first non-Indian to live among and speak the language of an extremely isolated tribe in the Brazilian Amazon. And in the 2 years that Ken lived within this tribe, lived and wandered with these people, he had the opportunity to observe and think deeply about their concept, their practice of generosity, which he came to understand was absolutely critical to their survival as a people. And Ken has told me that story a number of times, and it's always stayed with me. And Ken, in introducing you, I can't help but think that the practice of generosity may be key to all of our survival. So, Ken, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Fred. The world is not made of atoms. It's made of stories. And there are two kinds of story. Whether it's the Bible or your favorite movie or your favorite children's book, there are only two kinds of stories. The first is a person goes on a journey, and the second is a stranger comes to town. The first story, a journey. It happened on a weekend, and it happened in the West. A letter arrived at a family foundation, and the letter said that the person writing would like to have several $1,000s from that foundation. It was a family foundation, to give a dinner party. The dinner party would take place on a ranch. The guests would be flown there. There would be a chef brought in. The food would be just absolutely delicious. And then in the morning, that group of people would be taken for a walk in the West, out in the environment. And that evening, after a second delicious meal cooked by a marvelous chef in this beautiful ranch at great expense, the same group of people would be asked to write something in the coming year. One article, one editorial, one op-ed piece about an event or an issue that was crucial to the environment of the West. And this group of people happened to be the leading writers about the West, the leading novelists, the popular writers. I'm not allowed to say their names, but I will later if you ask me privately. The most fantastic writers, just extraordinary people who are reaching millions of people with their stories. We've seen those books on the bestseller list. We've seen the movies. But they had never, ever written about the issues of the environment. They all accepted. Well, the foundation made the grant. Great discussion. I was on the board. Big discussion at the board meeting. They made the grant, not a small grant. Everybody came, and every one of them wrote something that reached thousands and thousands of people. Second story, a stranger comes to town. It happened on a Thursday. It happened in the heart of a city. A major cultural organization, a museum. There's a director, marvelous curators are preparing a major grant for the foundation world. And this is a proposal to bring national experts, great thinkers, to their museum to look at a very distinguished, very valuable collection, extremely important collection. And with this grant will be accompanying educational programs, new catalogs, a new staff position which will be created through the grant. And at the same time this discussion is going on, a young curator looks out of the window, and they're in the storage area, in a beautiful area, study storage area of the museum. A young curator looks out of the window and sees, as one often did in those days, a group of people, or today, a group of people who were cleaning the street. It was street cleaning day in front of that museum in that urban city. The young curator leaves the room, goes outside, is observed to be speaking, maybe in Spanish, couldn't quite tell, to the person who's sweeping the street. There's a discussion going on. And she asks that man whether he would like to come inside and look at the collection and tell the group what he felt about the collection. He said to her, what is this place? She said, it's a museum. He said, I'm afraid I don't know what that means. What is a museum? She began to explain it. He said, well, I'm working. I'm off in 2 hours. I could come back. And she said, I'll be here. And he was brought into that museum, and he went through the collection in very great detail for a number of hours. And at the end of it, he said, I think I understand what you're doing here. I think I understand, well, I certainly heard what you said. I'm going to think about it, and I'd like to come back tomorrow at the same time. Will you meet me here? And she said, well, yeah, okay, I will. And he came back the next day, and he said, I have something I'd like to give you. I'd like it to be put on display in your museum. I have something for you. And he handed her his hat. And she said, well, it would have to have a label. And he said, oh, yes, but I'm not so good at writing. Maybe if I could say it to you. And she said, dictate it to me. Yes, if I could say it to you. If you would write down what I say, maybe that could be the label. And here's what he said. Before I left, I asked my father for his hat. He said to go ahead and take it. I would remember my father telling me not to come on a trip of suffering. I told him I knew that one suffers, but others have tried and succeeded. So I brought this hat and remembered. And sometimes I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. I remembered my mother, my brothers, everyone at home. This is the hat the museum now has. It is my way of remembering why I made this trip, and I ask God to continue helping me. The hat was incredible. It never fell from my head, even in the worst parts, like when I had to throw myself into the river that borders Guatemala and Mexico. I tied it to my chin with a bandana and a handkerchief. When I jumped off the train, I held onto it with both hands and jumped. It protected me from rain and sun. It also protected me from humiliation, when I was made fun of for the way I looked, or when I had to beg for a bite to eat. I would look at my hat and see how sturdy and grand it was. I could remember who I really was. A decent man, a hardworking man, a strong man, a man who had the hope of my family holding me together like the straw of my hat, so tight, keeping my memories together, so that when I put it over my eyes to forget the thirst, hunger, and sadness, things didn't seem so bad. Third story, a stranger comes to town. It happened on a Tuesday evening about 11 p.m. It happened in Los Angeles. It happened to me. I was coming out of the Central Library on the corner of 5th and Flower. Colin Thubron, the great writer, and Pico Iyer, equally great travel writer, had been speaking at the Library Foundation's Allowed Authors series. It was very dark. The lights were out in the little park in front of the library, and I nearly broke my neck. I tripped on the stairs because I tripped over people, a young man, I think. It was very dark, and I looked and my eyes adjusted, and there were probably 12 teenagers, it seemed, on the steps of the library, pressed up against the big bronze doors, pressed up against the building, and I saw an adult with a laptop. No, a teenager had a laptop. There were 2 laptops. Then I saw an adult pacing up and down in the dark, and I pulled myself together, and I went over to him, and I said, "What the hell is going on here? What is this?" And he said, that's my laptop, and that one's my girlfriend's. I just don't want them to disappear. These are kids in transitional housing. They're homeless kids, and actually those girls pressed up against the library door, they live in a box. They're sisters. They live in a box about 2, maybe 3 streets behind this building. They're here to do their homework because they get the free Wi-Fi by leaning up against the building at night. They're all in school. And I thought to myself, the city council has just cut, for the first time in the history of Los Angeles, the libraries from 7 days a week to 5 days a week. We should be open at night, not just 7 days a week. So what are the lessons for ourselves? What do we learn from stories? 1, don't do what others do. Don't do what others are doing. Do our own form of grant making. Trust ourselves to be creative, to find the courage, to be risk-taking. We have to educate our intuition. Martha Graham said it. She said the most important thing is to educate your intuition. And sometimes a good meal and a walk in the country with the right people is the context for reaching thousands of people on environmental issues. 2, make the least likely person your teacher. St. Augustine said that one best. He said, all you have to do is incline the ears of your heart. Incline the ears of your heart. The experts are the people, the undocumented worker sweeping the street in front of the museum, the teen in transitional housing. And we must examine what they mean by generosity. They can define it for us. 3, people know what they need. They know what they need to pull themselves out of poverty. They know what they need to get an education. They know what they need to find a job. They know what they need to be smarter. They know what they need. I'm very lucky as an anthropologist because I get to go to work every day in an office, a private foundation with a public purpose, but the office is in a public building on the top of the Central Library. So I see every day what people need. And what I've seen most recently is that they need a new definition for literacy. It used to be, can you read and can you write? And now it means, are you technologically literate? No one graduates from high school in this country, let alone in the city, without technology. No one can prepare a resume without technology. No one can find out what jobs are available without technology, or find a tutor, or get a scholarship, or complete their PhD without technology. We have to change that definition. What else do people need? They need free access to information. It has to be free. It has to be true. They need it for scholarships. They need it for citizenship. And they need it most of all for health care. And finally, most people, I'll speak for myself, what I need, what I desperately need, is someone who, when I walk into the room, not understanding the technology I'm trying to work with, being an immigrant to the land of technology, someone who will always speak with an accent, although our children are native born, I need someone who, when I walk into the room, looks up and says, "How may I help you?" and means it and can do it. It happens every day in all of our public libraries, and I get to see it every day. 115 million people came to our website last year. 100,000, between 90 and 100,000 kids after school every week. Every seat full in the 72 branches on the weekend. And what they want is someone to say, "How may I help you?" And that's our job. And that's what we do as philanthropists. It's our job to answer the question when people ask us, "How can you help me?" Thank you.
So thank you, Ken, and I want to thank all of our panelists. I just want to take a minute, and those of you who know me know that I won't give up this opportunity to add something from my perspective. One of the things I've caught as I've listened to each of our panelists is a common theme that they see philanthropy, they see their work as a way to sort of even the playing field, to deal with inequities in our society. And it reminds me, a couple years ago, I was surprised. I was at a meeting and somebody asked me, "Why do you do the work that you do?" And without thinking very much about it, I just answered rather quickly. I said, "Well, because the world's not a very equitable place." And that's true. We all know that. And we all work with that every day. But to me, and what I heard again today, is the promise of this great work we do is that we can do something about that by investing in people and communities that ask us for our help and we respond. And so I'm inspired by everything that I've heard today to keep that promise alive, and I think probably everyone in the room feels the same way. I think the challenge for all of us is that we just need to do more of it. So I want to thank you for coming here over the last 2 days. I want you to, before you leave, to maybe take a few seconds and ask yourself sort of what have you heard over the last couple days, maybe over the last hour, that has inspired you, that maybe you walk out of here a little bit more committed to. It'd be a shame for us to leave this room without sort of spending some time and asking ourselves those questions, because talking to people in the hallways, I know people are thinking about it. So I want to thank Jim Ferris, and I want to thank the team from the Center for Philanthropy and Public Policy for putting on what I think has been a fabulous 24 hours. I want to thank our panelists. You're all very, very inspiring people, and I want to thank you because every day you inspire me as well. So happy travels.